On show 446, politicians' EV scare campaign, the Aston Martin Rapide E, and a 1970s electric barn find. Those stories and many more coming up on today's edition of the show. So, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. In fact, wherever you are in the world, welcome to EV News Daily. I never know what time of day you will be listening to this. I'm guessing maybe a commute, maybe you're walking the dog, maybe at the gym, maybe you're at home, this is your morning routine or something. Well, here is your show for Wednesday, 17th of April. My name is Martyn Lee, and I've been through every EV story that I can find today, and there is so much going on, because it's the Shanghai Auto Show 2019, but also the start of the New York Motor Show as well. So there's plenty to report on. Today, mostly about the Chinese news and a bit of other stuff as well. We'll move on to what's happening in the US over the next couple of days. Well, if you are in the market for buying or selling an EV, maybe your EV, maybe you're thinking about trading up, or maybe this is the year you get your first one. Hello to Rajiv, who sent me an email last night, actually. He's got a white Bolt, a 2017 Bolt, and a white 2019 Volt. Either of those cars I would love in my driveway, by the way. Never met a Volt driver who doesn't love their car, or probably still with the same tank of gas they had when the dealer sold it to them. But if that's the kind of cars you'd like to pick up, I'm sure you can find some of those at myev.com. In the US, by the way, US only. We'll kick off with a US story, and EVGO, the charging network EVGO, have been installing battery storage. They've completed, or they have in construction, 14 battery storage systems located at 11 fast charging stations. Reports a website which you wouldn't expect me to be surfing around on. It's called Petrol Plaza. But the things I do for researching this show for you, even reading petrol websites. This is the largest deployment of battery storage systems at public fast charging stations in the US. Well, battery storage systems can offer relief to the demand charge rate structures that inhibit fast charging deployment and EV adoption, according to the company. Although EV fast charging stations don't always require a grid upgrade, as station sizes and power ratings increase, energy storage is going to become an important tool, offering load balancing and mitigating distribution grid upgrade costs. With more than 1,100 fast chargers in 34 states, EVGO electrified more than 75 million miles for EV drivers last year in 2018. Very interesting that we see here a charging network investing in battery storage rather than upgrading grid connections, which can be, when you involve the local power utility, massively expensive. So, what about putting some batteries on site? Batteries are getting cheaper all the time, even grid-level battery, and then you can gradually top up. It's like a bucket, isn't it? Like if you think about a bucket full of water, and an EV is like a small hole in the bottom of the bucket. If you, no, other way around, the EV is the big hole in the bottom, so it drains it quite quickly, but then the EV goes away. Maybe the station is set for 10 vehicles, but only 3 or 4 in use. Well, the smaller hole at the top, the grid can just top up the batteries. Maybe that's one way of rather cack-handedly describing it to you. But that grid connection hasn't got to be upgraded because the battery is that buffer. And, well, batteries are getting cheaper all the time. We're going to see more battery storage, not just at those, but places like Tesla superchargers and more as well over the next couple of years. Let's move from the US to the EU. Here in Europe, the European Union is making road transport cleaner, they say, by setting strict new carbon dioxide emission standards for cars and light commercial vehicles. The aim of the regulation adopted by the European Council today, and there's different bits of the regulatory framework here in Europe. There's bits of it that are more open to not so much lobbying. If you know, that's different to the US, where you can get paid lobbying and companies lobby, put a lot of money into it. There's rules against that over here, but there's bits of the legislature that are more open to, let's say, influence from member states. And let's say Germany, who have a big car industry, of course, they want to look after their interests. And so, you know, there's a little bit of trading and negotiation going on. Well, the European Council have adopted these new rules, so everyone, all parts of it, are now in agreement, which is what I'm trying to get to. From 2030 onwards, new cars are going to emit 37.5% less CO2, and new vans 31% less CO2 compared to current levels. Between 2025 and 2029, it'll be on on average 31% less. I think it says here both cars and vans are going to be required to reduce that CO2 from current levels. Those EU-wide fleet targets. The CO2 reduction effort's going to be distributed across manufacturers on the basis of the average mass of their vehicle fleet. So if you are not up to speed, I'll try and explain this super quickly. Here in Europe, we have rules on emissions for the entire fleet of cars that you sell. So if you're a car maker and you make 10 cars a year, say, well, the average emissions across that fleet have to be below a certain number. This year, they get to exclude the top 5%, I think it is, of emitting cars. So it doesn't... You can still sell those really big gas guzzlers, those big emitting SUVs and things like that, and not be at too much of a disadvantage. But going forward, that's why we see tie-ups with, or pooling of credits, if you like, between Fiat Chrysler, which happened last week, and Tesla. So Fiat Chrysler don't make enough EVs, not enough electric vehicles, but they've teamed up with Tesla, and a bit like trading credits, they can pay Tesla for theirs. So it is basically a system to encourage the automakers here in Europe to lower not just the odd one or two vehicles they make, but their fleet average, the total amount of cars they sell. It can get more complicated than that, but I've tried to simplify that if you're a newcomer to the podcast. Hey, let's talk about the Gigafactory 3, which is over in China. A recent flyover of Gigafactory 3 has revealed the upcoming electric car factory continues to follow an incredibly rapid build-out, with the first phase of the project seemingly entering the roof paving stage, according to Simon over at Teslarati. Well, compared to previous videos taken of the site, he says, more roof trusses are now in place, and some workers are now paving areas of the general assembly building's steel roof structure. More steel foundations have been laid as well, and the framework, what seems to be a multi-storey section, is currently being built too. The pace serves the project really well, considering the Shanghai office, the official in Shanghai, who made that comment a few weeks ago. His name was Chen Mingbo. He said that mid-May was the target date for completion of that first stage of the project. They can start to get general assembly up and underway and making cars in China. And it does what somewhat embarrass other countries that hold themselves, a lot of national pride. Like here in Great Britain, we like to think, we're very good at doing things. Lots of countries have national pride. We can do things great. Then the Chinese come along and when did Elon do the ground... whatever that's called, the ceremony where they, the name that escaped my brain, and was that February, January or February, and now we're talking about in May the factory will be complete. They'll start to put the equipment inside it. It's just embarrassing how quickly the Chinese can work. And in case you're wondering, I've seen lots of comments online from people saying, I'm sure that you know what people are like on Twitter and online. They go, I'm sure safety standards will be overlooked in order for Elon to have his way. Lots of people have been at the site, taking photographs, making, in a way, holding people to account. You see the factory workers leaving in all of their safety gear, all of their high vis and all of the stuff that they have to wear, like the protective headgear and all of that kind of stuff, getting into nice cars. These are, well-paid workers. These are not tens of thousands of people who are, being exploited. So the standards are very high. This is new China. This is China 2019. This is not what might be in your brain of the kind of the image that people like to paint. So this is super interesting. It kind of shows the rest of us sometimes what can be done when there's a will and a way. Certainly in this country, you couldn't get the planning through in 2 months, let alone 2 years before work was even started. I'll put a link to Teslarati in the show notes if you want to read more. Let's talk about a famous British name, sadly only name these days. Their name is MG Motor. Their Australian factory distributor has confirmed it's going to launch a fully electric version of their increasingly popular petrol car, the ZS, which is a small SUV, and they're doing it in 2020, says caradvice.com.au. The Mazda CX-3 sized car, the MG EZS, is going to give the company a rival for the cars on the market like the Kona and the Hyundai Ioniq, the e-Niro, The Nissan Leaf in Australia's pretty fledgling EV market. It's going to be China's first EV in Australia, and it should be a bit of a marketing coup as well. MG, of course, a famous British name, but now Chinese. The EZS has a 110 kilowatt electric motor, 45.6 kilowatt hour battery pack, a driving range on the old NEDC range of 335 miles. It's real world, almost half that, I reckon. About 50% less than the long-range Hyundai Kona that's got a 64 kilowatt-hour battery pack. Talking of Australia, I mentioned this story at the beginning of the show. Staying in Aussie right now, a toxic scare campaign surrounding electric vehicles in the first week of the election campaign, which has just kicked off down under, flies in the face of facts, they say, and it risks seeing Australia fall even further behind the rest of the world, according to the chair of a Senate inquiry into EV technology, says the website innovationoz.com.au. Well, following the unveiling of one of the parties over there, Labour's electric vehicle policy package, that included things like targets for half of all new vehicle sales, so any new vehicle sold, half of new vehicles in 2030, which is, heck, it's a long way off. Half of them to be EVs, but that's only new cars, right? The series of government ministers who are in opposition to Labour, they're the government ministers in power at the moment, have been wheeled out to spread misinformation and to confuse people. Labour's 50% target, just for new car sales, not anything to do with second-hand cars or anything like that. The Prime Minister is Scott Morrison, and he went on the radio to say this: "I'll tell you what, it's not going to tow your trailer. It's not going to tow your boat. It's not going to get you out of your favourite camping spot with your family." Saying that if you buy an EV in 2030, you can't tow your trailer, you can't tow a boat, you can't go camping. EVs are basically the antithesis of the Aussie outdoor lifestyle. That's what the Prime Minister went on the radio to say. Man, I got some words for him. I want to keep this podcast clean. But please, come on, you're making yourself look silly now. I mean, you really are. I got family in Australia. I love Australia. I love visiting. But come on, that's what your politicians are saying, just embarrassing yourselves. Now, moving on. Let's talk Aston Martin, and they are going to test the market for high-priced luxury EVs with their Rapide E, a car that we talked about briefly on the show yesterday. Automotive News Europe brings us news that Aston Martin is testing the market for very expensive, full electric cars with the Rapide E. It's a sedan. It was unveiled yesterday in Shanghai at the auto show, and Aston Martin's going to only build 155 of them. It's going to be their only battery-powered car until they revive the old Lagonda brand as an all-electric marque pretty early in the next decade. The Rapide E's driving range is 200 miles, about 320 Ks. I know what you're thinking, that's not a lot, actually, compared to other EVs on the market, but they're saying that even when you compare it to the Porsche Taycan, which is 311 miles, 500 Ks, that they don't need the range because Aston Martin are putting in an 800-volt battery system that allows rapid charging, so 80% battery in a half-hour stop. Andy Palmer from Aston Martin said customers are not looking for blistering supercar performance, but they are, and I quote, conscious about what Teslas can achieve, end quote. Interesting that one of the most famous car bosses out there, certainly one of the guys who absolutely knows what he's talking about, is happy to publicly quote one of his rival automakers by name. He says people are conscious about what Teslas can achieve. And so, Elon Musk tweeted yesterday. He said Tesla will be judged not only on the cars they make, Tesla will be judged on how quickly that they can inspire the rest of the world to go to sustainable transport. And that's kind of interesting because clearly Aston Martin there are going, well, look, if we're going to make a car, we're going to make a good car. And that's all down to the competition that's out there in the market. Okay, let's move on. We're talking about supercars here, but who actually designs them? Well, Reuters has been tracking where very high-profile EV talent is moving around the industry. René Christopher Woolman was the head of Mercedes-AMG's $2.75 million Project One supercar program. Project One is the supercar that is based on a Formula One car engine, at least. Well, he's moved jobs, and he's moved to Automobili Pininfarina, the Italian design superhouse that's making cars now, in a sign that innovation is high, and electric sports cars are the place to go, where you've got freedom to start from scratch and really make your mark, leave your legacy as a designer. Premium and high-performance electric sports cars are equivalent to the Ferraris and the Lamborghinis of the conventional auto world. So-called electric supercars can cost anything from $100K to $2 million if you're talking about the new Rimac concept with the C_2, priced in the region of about $2 million. But the Tesla's upcoming Roadster Founder series will be about a tenth-ish of that price. The upcoming role of startups in the development of the electric car market harks back to an era where if you were a talented engineer and designer like Gottlieb Daimler and Ferdinand Porsche, you could launch your own sports car brand on a comparatively modest budget. And the same thing is playing out all over again. It's fascinating to watch, isn't it? I love being part of this. I'm on the sidelines, I'm commentating on it, I'm watching it, but I love it. Moving to Ireland, and the Irish startup Electrify is investing €50 million over the next 3 years to convert classic luxury cars to EVs using bits of Teslas. Electrify is also working on a range of more affordable electric cars from 2020 onwards, writes Nora Manthe for Electrive.com, the industry website and newsletter. Electrify, the company, through its small start, is said to be concentrating on converting high-end cars, the likes of classic Ferraris, classic Lamborghinis and Astons, and putting electric parts inside them. Tesla bits go inside. Prices not cheap. You won't be buying one of these yourself. I don't imagine you will be, unless you're probably one of a handful of... If I've got a handful of millionaires that listen to this show, €750,000. You've got to have some spare change. And finally, let's get on to a couple more stories. Have I got time? Yeah, I got a couple of minutes. Car manufacturers are hoping to spur the market development of EVs by moving to electrified models from next year onwards. EV shipments are predicted to arrive at over 5 million this year in 2019. And that, if we can do 5 million EVs this year, or 5.15 is the current estimate around the world, that would be almost 30% growth on last year. Growth of new energy vehicles, if you exclude hybrids, because the hybrid number is bolstered. But if you take out hybrids, it's still a 51% increase year on year, says the Associated Press in a report out today. Car makers are carrying out development of EVs and speeding up the rollout faster than they really wanted to, actually, of new EV models in anticipation of global energy saving and emissions reducing trends, targets, and things they have to hit, as well as policies by various countries. Car makers are leaning towards EVs under their own new product series rather than rolling them into their current ranges. Think VW ID range. Think Mercedes EQ range. Yeah, you get the idea. BMW's I range. Yeah. And finally, a fun story to end with for the last minute. I found this on a website called Barn Finds. You know what a barn find is? A car that's been left to do nothing forever. Folks who like cars like the 1980 commuter car. Have you seen what a commuter car is? It's like a wedge of cheese with 4 wheels on. If you like one of these, you're certainly in a select group of people. It's an unusual looking car, and it's been found in a barn, and it's now on Craigslist in Indiana, southeast of South Bend. The seller wants $3,000 for the car. The commuter car, if you want to Google it, COMUTA, commuter, not commuter, but commuter car, was an upgrade and a continuation of the city car, CITI, city car, with a bigger battery. And the battery was actually inside the bumpers, front and rear. So if you had a shunt, you weren't just hitting the bumper, you were hitting the batteries. This is where they stored them. The Q factor was all but gone once the bumpers became the battery storage, but at least you weren't sitting on top of the batteries under the driver's seat, which you were on the original car. Another upgrade was the sliding side windows. The first one had snap-out windows, but they were upgraded to sliders for the commuter car. The listing that I found says it has a 48-volt motor, which is new, and it has 8 6-volt batteries. The top speed is 40 miles an hour and 40 miles of range. Isn't much these days, but some of those cars were upgraded back in the day to twice that, 50 mile an hour plus. I would not want to do over about 20 miles an hour in these tiny little wedges of cheese car. I'll put a link in the show notes to barnfinds.com if you want to have a little chuckle today. Right, let's get on to question of the week. Thanks to myEV.com, they've set us this question for you to weigh in on. Would you let your car be used when you're not driving it as part of a self-driving fleet or a ride-hailing service? Would you let your car be used when you're not driving it as part of a self-driving fleet or a ride-hailing service? Please do email me. My address is hello@evnewsdaily.com, and you can use Facebook and the YouTube comments as well. MyEV.com is always there to leave your comments on. Rightio, time for the endy bit. 212 patrons of the show keep me going. 445 shows sit in the archive. If you want to look at the blog, evnewsdaily.com is basically the one place to go to. There's a search thing on there, so if there's a thing that you want to listen to an old show, the show notes are also transcribed, so pretty much everything that you hear me say is in the show notes for a couple of reasons. For safekeeping, so I know what I said, for the archive, for search, actually. It helps people discover the show. So if you want to research or something, you can, on my search box at evnewsdaily.com, do that and it'll bring up any story when I've talked about that certain thing. The most important thing, though, is new ones. We want more people to hear the new shows and spread the word about EV News Daily. So hit subscribe in your podcast app and please do share this podcast far and wide so more people hear it. I'm just greedy like that. If you want to say hi on the socials, please search EV News Daily. I will catch you online, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Have a wonderful day. I will see you tomorrow. And in the meantime, remember, there is no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.